Hi, this is Ezra, samurai artist with Tap Lister, and we're with Alex Ganum of Upright Brewing at the brewery at the Left Bank Project, and we're going to do a little profile of the brewery and what's coming up and their techniques and philosophy. So Alex, what were your inspiration? Like, why did you want to open Upright Brewing?
Well, I've always enjoyed the beer culture out here in Portland for sure. I've been out here about 7 years now, and it's really floored me how into it people are. Not just the brewers, but the consumers too. The market out here is great. People are way into it and really educated, I think, and really receptive to different styles of beer. And I thought it would be cool to do something a little bit different. Obviously, we're doing some different methods here, maybe different yeast strain than what most brewers are doing. So I think that we're doing it because we're having a lot of fun, and we're kind of hoping that people are going to kind of dig it too and have fun drinking our beers. So.
And a lot of your beers are being described as farmhouse-inspired ales, but like a lot of people don't know what farmhouse brewing means. Mm-hmm. How would you explain it to those people?
For a term, I guess farmhouse is really broad. It's really general, and that's one of the reasons why we like it. I feel like it doesn't really pigeonhole us too bad, and that's one of the points about using it, I think, because it really has more to do with, I think, maybe the ingredients that you're using, and just sort of following sort of an individual approach to brewing and not really wanting the brew to style, in a way, is what farmhouse brewing is to me, in a sense. Kind of difficult to describe, but I would definitely say that there's certain yeast strains that really promote these types of flavors that tend to be a little bit more aromatic than probably the typical yeasts. Most Belgian and farmhouse strains are a lot spicier, a little fruitier, that sort of thing. So.
And how would you describe your main beers, the 4, 5, 6, and 7, for somebody who was just seeing those names and didn't know what to expect?
Yeah, I would say that they're, like you said, they're all farmhouse inspired. We do use almost all Oregon and Washington grown ingredients for the most part. But I would say that the 4 is probably just like a farmhouse style wheat beer. If you want to get more detailed about it, it's almost a cross between, say, American wheat beers and maybe even like Bavarian wheat beers, and maybe even like Belgian wit too, because it's got a little bit of extra tartness. So it's kind of a hybrid of all these different other styles of wheat beer, I think. The 5 is essentially just like a pale ale recipe made with our farmhouse yeast. And obviously that pulls out a lot of different aromatics from the hops themselves and then from the yeast too. So we have lots of spicy stuff going on in that beer. And it's really dry. And then the 6, we just call a farmhouse rye. It's kind of a much darker color than our other beers. It's a really deep copper, almost brown, really. And that has a lot of nice malty character, I think. But like most of our beers end up really, really dry. Our yeast is very attenuating, and I kind of joke around that we couldn't make a sweet beer if we wanted to in here. It's like it's impossible with our yeast. But that beer is kind of neat because you do have a lot of nice caramely flavors and some pretty deep malt characteristics, which people typically associate with a sweeter, fuller-bodied beer. But this is definitely not that. It's got some of those aromas, but you get it in your mouth and it's just really, really dry. And then the 7 is kind of like a strong golden ale. I kind of feel like that one's more akin to, say, like some of the stronger beers from the DuPont brewery. It's got lots of aromas. I think we got a lot of fermentation aromas and some nice hop aromas in that beer too. But the recipe is really simple. It's kind of, that one's more of like a fermentation driven beer for sure.
What kind of special beers and seasonal releases can we expect to see outside of the 4, 5, 6, and 7?
We're definitely trying to mix it up. We do use our French Saison yeast for some of our special beers. We're actually doing a summer Saison we'll be brewing next week, and that's going to have fresh Yarrow and dry calendula flowers in addition to hops. So that'll be kind of a really neat beer. It'll be really light. Should have some extra cool aromatics, I think. And then we're going to be doing a wit beer. That'll be one of the first beers that we brewed in an actual recognized style. I think will be our wit beer, and then we'll use wit yeast for that. It'll be really straight up. And then we're thinking about doing a triple with the wit yeast when we're done with the wit, obviously. And then we were also thinking about doing a coffee stout later this summer too. And so we're not specifically doing just French and Belgian inspired things. Like I said, we'll pull out things like coffee stout. We brewed an old ale for our inaugural batch. I mean, we're definitely not going to be so strict that we'll only stick to Belgian type things or French things or this and that. So.
You're also doing open fermentation, which is a lot of people are talking about, don't seem to understand. How would you describe that, and like what's the reasons for doing open fermentation opposed to closed fermentation, and what are the pros and cons of doing that?
Well, first off, open fermentation, the way that we're practicing it is not spontaneous fermentation. I think some people are kind of mixing that up. We do only use one yeast strain for our beers. We don't invite other organisms into the room that the open fermenters are in. We keep it as clean as we can. And so the only difference between that and sort of a more modern type of fermentation is just like it sounds. The open tanks have no top to them. They're not pressurized or anything like that. So there's sort of a difference in the shape of the fermenters. They're definitely wider and more shallow than what a typical like closed tank would be of the same size. And that might be producing some different flavors for us. I've read that there's some influence on the flavor profile based off like the size and shape of the fermenters. And I tend to believe that we're going to eventually run some batches through. We do have one closed tank that we'd like to kind of do a side-by-side and see what kind of differences there really are. I think that'd be really interesting. But we use the open fermenters because we just kind of like to. It's a lot of fun. We think the yeast really likes to ferment in there. It tends to be really healthy. We have really good starts to our fermentation. The yeast here is always really happy. So I think the yeast really enjoys being in those open fermenters for sure.
And a lot of people are asking about bottles. Is that coming up soon? And what are your plans for bottles?
Yeah, we're going to start bottling beer probably in about 3 weeks. And hopefully, if our labels get approved in that time, we should be seeing those first batches probably about a month and a half from now then, which would be put us somewhere in July for those bottles to be out and about. So,
what kind of bottles, and are they going to have like corks, caps, cages? Are they bottle conditioned?
Yeah, we're going to be bottle conditioned everything in 750 milliliter champagne bottles, the kind of the big green ones, with no corks, just caps.